As entrepreneurs, as solo entrepreneurs, we are our own boss. And I don't know about you, Michael, but one of the biggest barriers I experience is my own distractibility, my own attention, and how I'm focusing it, because I don't have external deadlines all the time the way I did when I worked at the CBC.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a fantastic one. Our guest is a coach and host of a new podcast, A Success of Our Own. Natalie Ruskin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. You know, and spoiler alert, Natalie and I are longtime friends. We always have good conversations about all sorts of stuff. One of those being one's own personal development and journey through career and life and balance and all that good stuff. And so I'm excited to have you on the show. I'm really excited about your new podcast. I think our listener will absolutely love listening to it. But before we get into all of that, Natalie, tell us a little bit about you, your career journey leading up to this point.
Sounds great, Michael. I'm chuckling to myself because I'm sitting here in my closet with like yoga blocks stacked up and this makeshift situation for the microphone. And you'd think that I didn't know anything about broadcasting equipment, but I did spend 10 years working for Canada's public broadcaster in news and current affairs. So I spent many of my years in my 20s and 30s in dark edit suites. And yet getting the microphone to work this morning was a very interesting journey of practicing the second half of my career, which is self-compassion and mindfulness and acceptance. Because for sure in the past, I would have felt all these thoughts of I'm such an imposter, I'm such an amateur, what's he going to think? And then I would start to shut down. And with that first question you asked, it would have sent me into a bit of a anxiety spiral around how I'm being received and how I'm coming across as incompetent. So I kind of alluded to my story, very driven, ambitious, got hired at one of the top news shows before I even finished my graduate journalism program. And midway through that career, hit a burnout because I just I didn't know when enough was enough. I just really pushed myself so hard. And that's how I discovered mindfulness, which was a life-changing moment for me, that I could create calm at will, that I could actually find ways to relax tension in my body. And one thing led to another. I got the bite. Mindfulness really transformed my whole world. And I became a coach and launched my own coaching business and now my podcast, which went live last week.
Wow. Fantastic. Well, I actually personally know people who have been coached by you, and they rave about you as a coach. And so, it's one of the things about our own personal development and who we are and our journey through life is that, and it's one of those human conditions. I think we talked about that actually last time we spoke when we were trying to do this podcast, actually. A couple of weeks ago, and Riverside what we record on wasn't cooperating with us. But it was just funny how conversations flow. And we got talking about imposter syndrome, but also the human condition of one overvaluing others' capabilities and undervaluing our own capabilities. And so it'd be interesting to work in such a high level organization as you did. And yet everyone's probably looking at you like you've got it all together. You're amazing. Great, great, great. Yet on the inside, that's not what was going on for you.
That's a really interesting snapshot. And it's true. I mean, I remember I thought it was people were just joking, but I was a keener, and externally, I was really making waves happen. I was leading original series at the CBC, pitching new content, and I was getting it greenlit. I think, I may have told you, I produced this original series with Olympian swimmer Mark Tewksbury, and it was the first time we put something on content online, on TV, audio. It was the whole multi-platform thing was a big thing then. It was mid 2000s or so. In my head, I felt, what's wrong with me? Why? I just put everyone around me on this pedestal, feeling like they have what it takes to kind of handle this environment. And why am I so sensitive? Why can't I be as decisive as these other people? And I remember there were people who'd be like, when are you going to be, I'm embarrassed saying this, but this just shows the disconnect between our self-perception and how we're perceived. There were people in the building who I respected, and they'd say, when are you going to be running the network? And I mean, that might just be a joke because they saw how serious and intense I looked when I was schlepping beta SX tapes from the library to the edit suite. But I'd hear them say that, and I'm like, oh, they're saying that the way they'd say to someone who looks like they are going on their first run ever on the street, and they're struggling, and it's you got this, you got this. I feel like that's what they were trying to say to me to motivate me. But I think in hindsight, I was making waves. I was having some pretty profound impact, and yet I wasn't able to allow myself to see it. I was attached. I was addicted to this belief that I wasn't enough. I wasn't doing enough. And there was almost this unconscious kind of sadistic or self-sabotaging addiction to that negative belief. I felt more in control, seeing myself as not good enough than allowing myself to see that I was more than enough.
Amazing. And it speaks to our own success and how the journey to it, the one of the most important pieces is our own mindset and our own self-belief. And without that, I mean, it's self-fulfilling as well, as you likely saw, right? You were believing one thing, and guess what? It proves true, because everything you're doing, your whole existence is going into that belief that you have. And so yet, many people are successful and yet feel completely opposite of being successful, and maybe don't even know what success is for themselves. I mean, that's a whole nother line to this, is that it's what you're thinking inside, but also how does one even define their own success or success in general? Many have that completely all backwards and upside down and complete question mark, really. And so all of that going on, what was that shift for you that actually had you switch that over and take yourself on a new journey?
There was really this shift from almost this external locus of, essentially it came down to everything for me was based on, what do you think about me? How am I coming across? How do I look? How much do I weigh? What are my marks? It was all external metrics for success. And I think as I look back, all those things like my weight, my grades, like what people, their compliments were about me, what size I could fit in. Like I often had a fraught relationship with those types, that kind of data. And the shift for me was when I started to move that locus of self-assessment to the internal, and to be able to discern inside of myself a sensation, an experience of ease, of enough, of acceptance. And today I'm very tuned into my body. I know when I feel stressed, when I feel tense, when I'm anxious, I feel it right away in my body. And that's where, even before I know intellectually, I can feel the stress, the tension. At the beginning of this journey for me, I didn't know it's like I was a head on top of a body. I didn't have that embodied awareness of myself. And so I can imagine those of you listening, or some of you might be like, what is she talking about? I think I didn't know I didn't know at the time what this was, but I know that the minute, as I said, that I started to practice mindfulness, which is simply put, bringing awareness to the present moment without judgment, bringing awareness to the present moment without judgment, I was able to have this objective experience just through this connection with my body, with sensation, with this shift from like being tense to relaxed, of like what felt good. And I was able to, an example comes to mind. I was asked to interview for a job to work in the UK for CBC, like a quarter of the way through my career. And I prepared Mike so much for this interview, like as I always did. I over-prepared to the point that I didn't get enough sleep. And I remember getting into that interview, and I sat down, and the first question was, there was like 3 people or 4 people in the room, and there was someone remotely in London, the head of the bureau chief. And their first question was, how did you prepare for this interview? And I panicked. Right away, I just felt so anxious about saying the wrong thing. And then I just felt this like whole wash of sensation come up in my body of like, I thought I was going to faint. I felt nauseous. I felt I couldn't get a clear thought out. And I just kept saying like, and it was like deer in the headlights. It was so uncomfortable and horrible at the time. And the contrast for me is, after I started to discover mindfulness, was I remember having like interviews like that after that time. And my only work was to stay present and not go into my head intellectually about what will other people think. And so now, going back to what we talked about at the top of this question, my locus of enough, of self-assessment, of success, you could say, is based on integrity with my inner knowing, with my intuition, with what like my deeper awareness is of myself in that moment. I'm happy to expand on that, but I'll pause there for a moment to see if this.
No, I'm really I love hearing that, and I think when people are running their own business, and I would like to ask you a couple of questions about that transition, right? Mm-hmm. From working in broadcast and then going into something completely different. But yet people running their own business, and when it comes to their own mindset, right? It's often they're by themselves on their own, solopreneurs, if you will, and all they have is their mindset, right? And it can be very challenging because you've got your own mindset. It's difficult to bounce ideas off family members because they're going to say, go the safe route most of the time, where that you meet someone who cares for you that's going to say, yeah, true. Risk it all. Just go and risk it all. Jump into you can't swim, no problem. Dive into the deep end. You'll figure it out. And so it can be a very lonely place. And if you, like most human beings have this, these human conditions, it can be challenging starting and growing and running your own business. And so mindfulness, which people have been talking about for years, but I don't think as much as they are talking about it now, and the research, so much research into meditation and how just having that mindfulness and becoming present, how important it is to your own peace of mind, your well-being, your performance, your experience of success, I guess you could say, and your ability to produce results in your life and in business. So it's very important, yet so few even know what it is or practice it. And so I find it really interesting and so nice to hear such transparency as to what you were going through, because I know our listener and myself can relate to that different times in our life. So with that, I'd love to hear how you then transition. It's like, okay, I've built my whole life around broadcast and journalism, and you were literally working for one of the largest organizations. You were doing transformative work in terms of where the industry was going, and then you changed it all. How did that happen?
I want to answer that in two ways. Like there's the how of what you would see in terms of like a timeline of like Natalie leaves the CBC, Natalie has 2 children, Natalie, like there's those sort of milestones. And I'm happy to share that. But to me, as a coach, as someone who supports people to really create the how and changes in their lives and the transformation, it's the how on more of a habit, routine, practice level that led to those external changes. Because I know it's so tempting when I meet people who have what I want. It's like, how did you do that? And it's like, I could sit there and take notes of like, okay, you registered your business, you joined a mastermind, you created a website, whatever. Like we know those things, and I can share that. But if you're okay with it, Michael, I'd love to talk about the inner how, because that's how the outer how manifested.
Please do.
And I was thinking about this before our conversation. I like threes, and I feel like there's 3 kind of core pieces that shifted for me that are still essentially foundational to my how today. The first one was, what's my why? Getting clear on my why. The second one was asking myself throughout the day. So there's this sentence that is misattributed to Albert Einstein, which is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So there was a daily checking in around that, almost that filter, that lens with myself. And then the last sort of practice, which is the last how, was a review of my day. What were my wins? Where did I struggle? Where did I experience awe? And I think those 3 pieces created a new pathway for me to move towards what I wanted. And they kept me in the guardrails, so to speak, so that I wasn't veering off constantly to that place of self-doubt that I identified earlier, of like that endless questioning and judging myself and undermining, which is the quickest way to burn out because it's so exhausting. Like those negative thoughts, we know from the neuroscience that they take us to that fight, flight, freeze place in our nervous system, and they're so draining. But when we're connected with the thriving part of ourself, the positive emotion part of the brain, which we've identified in the brain, there is a region that is connected with positive emotion. That's our rest and digest setting. That's the opposite of the fight, flight, freeze. That's where we can feel that sense of connection, of empathy, of laser focused, attention. And so for me, these 3 practices kept me out of that negative emotion sort of more primal survival response of like, there's a saber-toothed tiger around the corner that's going to get me, and more in this place of abundance and possibility. And so the first part of the why, it's almost like, where is your compass pointing? Like, you could say, I want to start a bookkeeping business, or I want to start my own landscaping business, but it's so critical to connect with, like, why is this important? And it doesn't have to be this like esoteric, spiritual answer. It could be, I refuse to work in a fluorescently lit 9-to-5 corporate job. Like, I'm done. That is terrible for my health. As long as I am outdoors and I don't care what I'm doing and making the ends meet with bills, I'm good. Like, whatever that why is, just taking the time, and we can, if you want, I can expand on how we connect with the why, but just taking that time to like plant that root or plant that seed so that we're connected with the right foundation. The second piece is that around the definition of insanity, which as entrepreneurs, as solo entrepreneurs, we are our own boss. And I don't know about you, Michael, but one of the biggest barriers I experience is my own distractibility, my own attention, and how I'm focusing it, because I don't have external deadlines all the time the way I did when I worked at the CBC. I'm setting my own deadlines. I'm setting my own daily, weekly, monthly objectives, goals. And I struggled at the start of my sort of solo business career with rationalizing, oh yeah, I'm going to go spend like 2 hours on Canva to like work on my business card. And I wasn't aligned with what were my core priorities, which were to increase my revenue, to expand my outreach to other watering holes. And so the definition of insanity, which is connected, like that line I use of, is this insane what I'm doing right now? Which connects with knowing our why, is if I'm deciding to go reorganize the linen closet because I work from home and it looks so appealing to me to like, oh, it will be so helpful to have like all the white sheets on one shelf and the pattern sheets on another shelf, and I'm going to spend an hour. I'm going to watch the Martha Stewart video.
I like the sounds of that linen closet.
I'm gonna just like put the Martha Stewart video. I'm gonna watch it first. Then but I'm gonna make a tea first. And you know what? While I'm downstairs making my tea, I'm gonna reorganize the tea drawer also, because that's gonna, like, honestly, that was stuff that I would get caught up in. And at the end of the day, I'd feel like, what the F did I do with myself? And I haven't moved the needle. And then that whole cycle of like shame, regret, judgment would come up. And so it kind of leads, so there's that piece of discernment, of self-honesty and awareness of what I'm doing with this most critical resource of my attention, and being really discerning and deliberate with what I'm doing with my time and my day based on knowing what my why is. And then the final piece is that daily review, which is a really beautiful way. It took a while for me to imprint that practice, because as a parent of young kids, which I know you are too, like, I get into bed and I was like just done. Like, the idea of putting any brain power into anything was so beyond me. But I realized that there was something that needed to change in terms of my mindset going to bed, because I'd feel like I did all these things during the day, but I feel like I haven't accomplished anything, and I'm judging myself about it. And so I developed this practice where I just have this journal beside my bed and a pen, and I just jot down, what were my wins? Where did I struggle? Where did I experience awe? And what I love about this practice is it helps me, again, create a bit of containment and structure with my day. And over time, what happens is things are happening in the day, in the moment, and I'm like, oh, this is a win. Yeah, this is going on the list for sure. Or I, like yesterday when my son, an incident happened and he was sent up to his room because of unacceptable behavior, and we have boundaries in our shared space. I was like, yep, this is a struggle. This is going down. Struggle, control. Yep, I'm struggling with my control issues. So it just creates a beautiful continuity. And I feel like I'm much more intentional and efficient in my days with my time, with my energy, and with my attention, which those are 3 core resources that I have to work with as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And such some great practices. And you mentioned the why, how you figure out that why and some, maybe a pathway. I'd love to hear that. I think our listener would benefit from hearing from you on how do you discover or tap into, as you said, the root or plant the seed of your why.
So there's a lot of ways we can do this. The one that comes up for me is like the hell yeah or hell no chart, which is kind of a fun way of just doing a brain dump. And you could even have, like, you divide a piece of paper into 4 quadrants. I do this with clients when they're getting pulled into, like, Stephen Covey talks about the 4 quadrants, and he's a guy who wrote the 7 traits of highly effective people, I think was.
Yeah, the 7, is it 7 secrets? 7 secrets of highly 7 habits.
Habits, thank you.
Yeah, 7 habits of highly effective people. Yeah.
Don't ask me, Michael, to tell you what those are. I could paraphrase, but I do remember the visual of the 4 quadrants, which we all know this. We know that we get pulled into putting out the fires because that's what our nervous system is primed to do. It's a survival mechanism. And then we also get pulled into doing the like easy but really insignificant tasks like loading the dishwasher or ordering more closet. Diapers on Amazon. What did you say?
The linen closet.
The linen. That's a little. Come on, Michael. Let's take that up a notch. That's a bit more sophisticated here.
Yeah, that's important and urgent.
I don't even know if I have a linen closet. FYI, that sounds very, very bourgeois. So it's just this sort of idea of like, divide your paper in 4 squares. The top left is the hell yeah, which is the stuff that lights you up the most, that you love doing, that you want to do, even if it's scary, like write the novel, earn 6 figures, like post-tax, go on an amazing whitewater rafting trip with my family, okay? Then there's the hell no, which are the things that you detest about the work that you do, that you just, and about like just stuff you hate doing, like that is part of your day-to-day that takes up time and energy. And then one of the other 2 lower quadrants is the stuff that the fires that you get pulled into dealing with, like those urgent things that you have to deal with. And then the final quadrant, which could be your bottom right, is those like distraction. They're kind of like not urgent and they're not important. And I think just I like setting my timer when I do these types of exercises because it makes it feel less daunting. You could set it for 10 minutes. Make yourself a cup of tea if you want, but don't organize the tea drawer. And start to just brainstorm like, okay, what are the things I love? What are the things that I hate? What are the things that I get pulled into doing that are urgent? What are the things I get pulled into doing that aren't even important? And I would then look at the one that is the stuff you love. And one of the things I like to guide my clients through is a almost look back exercise where we imagine ourselves as in our 70s or 80s looking back at our life. And it's nice to imagine yourself in a setting that feels centering for you, like a somewhere in nature that you love or a space you love. And really connecting with this experience of being in your wiser, older years. And from that place, looking back and reflecting on what are you most proud of having created? What are you most satisfied about having done or made or put out into the world? And I think though that's a place that will help guide your compass to what's most important for you. Because once we connect with that, it really kind of lands the plane around what is most essential for us and then working from that place.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic exercise. What I really love about that is that timer. I think that's a key piece. I don't hear that too often, where you kind of think, in my own experience of these sorts of exercises, like, how do you even, we're talking something so huge, figuring out my why. If you didn't put some limits on it, you could just not even start because it's being so daunted. How will I know when I've figured it out? All these good things. I love the idea of a timer. It's like, you know what? Do the timer, see where you land at the end of the timer. It puts a container on it, on something that's really, really big and may help. And as well, the look back, it's so powerful to tap into our inner wisdom through these types of exercises. And listener, I encourage you to do that. Get yourself a tea and set the timer and do this and see what comes up for you. It can be really awing.
And I would add a couple of things, Michael, to that. One is, yes, please do not make this the be all end all. What's my why? Like we spend lifetimes paralyzed trying to answer that. So just what is it for today? What's a good enough? And the timer is a great structure that forces us to make this right-sized for ourselves. The other thing it's one of the three kind of pillars for me I like to talk about a three-legged stool that keeps me steady. And if there was video, you'd see I'm doing this for Michael with like the three fingers on the ground to show the three legs. So one of them is the accountability piece. And for me, having someone that after I do this why exercise that I share it with is so key. A, it makes me actually do the exercise. And B, saying it out loud to someone else is so powerful to just be heard and received. And perhaps they could do that with you too. I do that with my spouse sometimes. We sometimes in our own way do it with the kids. So the accountability is really a critical piece because otherwise we take the path of least resistance. We take the easier, softer way. And then we stay in that insanity place of doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. We have to be willing to move the needle and do something different.
Absolutely. That's where we discover new things, and it takes courage to do it as well. Now, I'd love to talk a little bit about your podcast. This is brand new. Tell us a little bit about it.
This is a podcast about the question that has been rattling around in my head for the last 20 years, which is how do we move beyond the never good enough around success to a good enough success, a sustainable success that we can just finally relax into. I myself struggled with these mainstream metrics of success, which we touched on a little at the start of this conversation of status, salary, striving. And it just caused this relentless, unsustainable sort of inner pressure system inside of myself. And it never did lead to lasting results. And so for me, in this podcast, it's like asking this provocative question to people who have had their own journey of transformation from one version of success to another. So one of my guests is Amanda Monday, who left a heteronormative marriage after 2 kids, and she's queer now, and she finally prioritized her sleep. Whereas, like, for so many years, she called herself the triple A-type Aries, I think. And I'm trying to remember what the other A was. A plus. I think she always needed to get A pluses. But now she feels internally like she can just rest. And so it's been, the each interview, each episode is a different story of transformation with some really helpful practices that are weaved in.
Very cool. And having done it now, you're how many episodes in? You launched with 4, I believe, episodes, and then you're launching them. How many episodes will come out each week or month? Or
we're rolling out 1 episode a week. I have 10 episodes to this season. And we'll be doing some feed drops as well from other awesome curated podcasts that will be also included in my feed. But listeners, those of you who are wanting to tune in, you can expect every Tuesday morning a fresh interview with me on your podcast listening platform.
You can listen to it after you listen to this.
Oh, is that?
Because it's Tuesday too.
That's the priority. First, Michael, then Natalie. That's the list. Okay.
Make sure we keep that there. Yes. That's exciting. So you've recorded a handful, good bunch here. You're doing them in seasons, which I always thought is really a clever idea that people brought seasons to podcasts and, contain it again. We've never done seasons. It's like the never-ending season for our podcast, but I like that idea. What have you learned in these interviews about yourself and about just success in itself?
It's that cliche, but there's cliches for a reason. That cliched quote from Steve Jobs, where looking back, you can see how all the dots connected. And what I've heard from the people the guests and listeners, is that there's something really special about these episodes for them because they really feel in the room with me, and they feel this sort of experience of self-acceptance and of an ability to really reflect on why they made certain choices without judgment. And so, and the reason I say dots connecting is all those years when I felt too sensitive and emotional and not able to put myself on air to be like an on-air host because I didn't feel like I had what it took. Like with this podcast, I'm doing all of that. I'm utilizing those parts of myself, which at the time I felt were inadequate, but I'm doing it in a way that's aligned with my why, which is to help people relax and find and celebrate what's already successful in their life and build on success from that place of abundance rather than on the scarcity. So for me, it's been what I've learned is that I have everything and that I'm thriving in those things that I used to discount as flaws.
Very cool. Very cool. And what would be your favorite episode so far?
Oh my gosh. It's like choosing my favorite child. I can't do that. I will say
it's been one of your standouts.
I'm going to give you a teaser. The first interview with Caroline Marie Brooks, who's part of the trio Good Lovelies in Canada. They've won a Juno. She's a blessed singer-songwriter. I do something really fun and vulnerable with her at the end of that episode, which is part of my bucket list. So that was a special favorite, but they really are all so strong. I'm so proud of this project and of what I've created.
I love it. So interesting how you went, kind of full circle, get back into your area of training and expertise and so much experience, right, that you have in broadcast and bringing it to a podcast that's in line with your own values. And I think that's a big piece of of the journey is that all the little bits and pieces we pick up along the way lead to the big picture. And we take them like, an artist's, palette of colors and tools that they use to paint the canvas. It's like those are our experiences. And then, we're blessed if we can actually use those future in our life to paint new pictures and new masterpieces. So really great. Tell us a little bit about where our listener can get more information about you, if they're interested in learning more about your coaching work or the podcast. What's the best way for them to do that?
You can look me up, natalieruskin.com. So NATALIERUSKIN.com. There's a free download guide there to help you with the mindset piece. So if you go there, part of what we talked about at the start, I have a guided audio worksheet, which is there to support people to start to make those changes. And I'd love to hear from you. You can also email me, Natalie@natalieruskin.com.
Beautiful. And the title of the podcast, again, it's on, I imagine, all the places people listen to podcasts.
A Success of Our Own.
A Success of Our Own, and give that a listen. Of course, after you listen to this on Tuesday, you can have that feed. It just keep your workday busy and learning as you listen to these podcasts. Natalie, this has been fantastic learning about you and such a great conversation about your journey. And I want to thank you on behalf of our listener for your generosity in coming on the show and sharing this with us today.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for your really thoughtful questions. I feel that I'm in the same room as you, Michael, and I really enjoyed this as well.
Beautiful. Well, the pleasure has been all of ours. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.